Hey guys! So one of the questions that we get asked the most is, why do all of our ministry as a family? We have 8 children. It's a lot of children. A lot of them are still pretty young in age, and we have children with special needs. And so it's a valid question, and every time somebody asks me, I totally understand. But I wanted to give an explanation here on video, especially now that we're launching the ministry. And so the Bible talks about in Psalms about children being arrows in your quiver, right? And so a big deal for me is arrows are active. Arrows are an active part of what's being shot, you know, from the shooter. And so the Bible speaks very highly of children all across the Gospels. Jesus spoke very highly of children and actually asking believers to be like children, right? So the Bible talks about children. The Bible has high esteem for children. But I also wanted to share with you guys some of our own personal stories and why we do ministry as a family. One of those stories actually happened very recently in Peru. We were visiting an orphanage that was about an hour and a half outside of Iquitos, and we were going there for the first time. And so Ricky strapped Grace's chair, her wheelchair, to the top of the car. And then when we got there, after an hour and a half, he unstrapped the wheelchair and he grabbed Grace out of her car seat and put her into the wheelchair. And the whole time the orphanage director was watching my husband, unbeknownst to us. So later on, when we gathered amidst all of the kids, there was a beautiful group of kids, and we were already so inspired by him and the ministry and what they were doing there. He grabbed all of the kids and he began to just really minister to them, and then he began to cry, like to almost sob. He had so many tears in his eyes, and he said that when he watched my husband take Gracie out of the car, and he realized the responsibility that we had taken on as parents to adopt children with special needs and to on purpose bring them wherever we went. He was more ministered to by that than by anything else that we had done at the orphanage that day. And so in that moment, we realized taking Grace on the airplane from, you know, here to Peru, although it was a lot of work, was 100% worth it, even if just for that moment, to minister to that man. In that there are other people around the world who are loving on children and doing hard things, and that was the moment of ministry for him. And it was our Grace, it was our daughter. The second example I wanted to share with you guys was actually from our time in Mexico during mission school. Twice, and many of you have heard these stories, but some of you may have not. So twice, our kids were the ones that actually had the word of knowledge. We would go out and we would minister to people in the city center, and we would pray and we would ask the Lord for a word for, you know, the people we were going to go see and the people we were supposed to pray for. And so on one occasion, my son David actually had a word about a woman who would be carrying a large black purse, and we ended up finding her and being able to pray for her and really encourage her and bless her. And she was absolutely stunned that it was my son who had been the one who had called her out and known that the Lord wanted to go to her that day. The second example was my daughter Sarah Beth. At the time she was only 5, she had just turned 5, and she had been praying and seen a woman dressed in yellow and blue, and we thought, well, that combination is unique. But the very last week we were in Mexico, we actually saw a woman dressed in a bright yellow top and blue pants, and we couldn't believe it because we're like, wow, this is what my daughter has described a few weeks ago. So we went to talk to her, and we shared with her that our daughter had actually seen a picture of a woman wearing what she was wearing, and we asked her how we could pray with her. And in that moment she began crying, and she said, I'd lost my 2-year-old son many years ago, and it still hurts a lot. And so from that place we were able to introduce the love of the Father that shared the story of her with, you know, the description of her with our 5-year-old daughter, to then be able to minister to her in that exact moment and to let her know that God saw her and that God loved her. The last example I want to share with you is from our time in Ukraine for our second adoption for Judah and Grace. We were waiting for the finality of the adoption, and we had gone as a family with just the 6 children at the time to just walk around and view some different parts of Ukraine. And we happened to stop into a special coffee shop, and we were able to meet some of the waitresses, and we were just being very intentional because large families don't necessarily walk into coffee shops in Ukraine, and so they immediately took notice of us. And every day that we were there in that city, which was 2 or 3 days, we went into that coffee shop, actually several times, because we just absolutely adored their coffee. And one occasion my daughter actually spilled her coffee all over the floor, and so the waitresses had to come and clean up for our family, and thus began interaction with these beautiful people. And so our final day there, we had grown, you know, more of a friendship than an acquaintance at that point with the waitresses. And our final day there, we let them know that we would be heading back to finish the adoption in the other part of Ukraine. And the waitresses had a gift for us. They actually had set aside some coffee for our family. And then also, as we walked out, their faces were incredibly sad. One of the waitresses actually handed me an intentional letter. And in the letter, I still have it framed, she wrote out how our family had impacted her life simply by being our family. We had walked into the coffee shop and had coffee and interacted with them, you know, and loved our kids in front of them, and just we're a family, and how that had impacted her life greatly to watch us simply being a family. And they were so impacted that they actually left the coffee shop, all of the waitresses, at the same time as we were leaving the last night we were there, and they asked to take a picture with us. And so I have this picture where all of our family is standing with these beautiful waitresses, and left the restaurant completely unaccompanied, but they just really wanted to cherish the moment that they had and have a picture with our family. And so these 4 stories, while they're not all of the stories, are simple reminders to me and to Ricky that we minister as a family, and that many times while Ricky and I may hear the Lord on something, or maybe the ones that are going to minister to somebody, that our children are essential, an essential part to our team. In fact, I don't believe we could function the 100% the way that God has called us to unless we did it as a family. And also, we cherish this time for our children to learn and to grow. And one of the best ways that we know how to do that is to parent intentionally in everything that we do, whether we're here in our home or we're on the missions field. Lastly, our family, just by being our family, impacts so many people. Like the fact that our family, not only did we have 5 biological children, and we value children, you know, but we also adopted 3 children who otherwise would not have a family. And just walking around and being a large family impacts others so greatly. I just see people's faces as they watch our family, and they're so impacted by simply family.